Welcome to the Thunderdome of Pixels and Politics, where memes might just dictate our next president and your scroll is more powerful than your vote. This is the Adotat Show, where we dive headfirst into the digital battlefield of political advertising. Strap in. It's going to be a bumpy, enlightening ride. Let's get started and know more than you did yesterday.
Deserve to win when it matters most. Facing multi-billion-dollar bet the company litigation? No problem. That's why we're here. Trackman Amin, LLP is a true legal powerhouse.
Welcome to the Adotat Show's political panel, where the heat of debate rivals a Twitter war on election night. With us is Gavin Dunaway from the Media Trust, is dropping insights so sharp they could cut through a political spin. There's Julie Victor of Sabio. She brings a playbook so advanced it makes campaign strategies look like child's play. There's also Larry Harris of Alpha Precision Media. He's here to precision bomb us with tactics that will make pollsters jealous. And there's Mark Jablonowski, the tech oracle from Optimal. He's decoding digital dilemmas like they're swing state secrets. And Craig Becher from OpenX is unraveling ad tech mysteries with the flair of a whistleblower. But last but not least, we have Jamie Vasil from Basis Technologies. Strap in, it's going to be a wild ride. Main question, okay, let's just cut to the chase. Joe Biden's team is breaking into TikTok vault, bypassing the No Politicians Club. It's like sneaking into a speakeasy under prohibition. How is this old school politician shaking up things on a platform buzzing with Gen Z's short attention spans?
That's great.
Anyone? Go ahead.
TikTok is an unbelievably important platform. We're seeing that it was just voted to be banned in the House mere hours ago. But it is such a crucial component to reach voters wherever they're at. And Gen Z voters are going to be increasingly important with this election, and being able to have your message in front of the people that ultimately you need to vote for you are very important needs.
I'd add too, there's 41 million Gen Z voters up for grabs, and about 49% of them are diverse. So it's no surprise that he's on the platform and using the, this or that, with the Super Bowl ads. So he's meeting them where they are.
I think it's a must kind of place to be for the campaign. I won't say must buy, can't buy ads there currently politically, but right. I think the organic presence and the ability to be creative and use humor in that messaging will really resonate with that younger group of voters. Activating that group and getting them to the polls on election day will be kind of crucial, right, to his campaign. So how does he connect with them, not just where they are, but related to issues they care about? So I think the power is in not just being there, but the messaging. And he's going to have to be creative and be humorous, I think, to really engage that group.
And I think the authenticity meter. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Gavin. Go ahead.
Well, I was also going to say that I think there's a lot of disconnect between Biden and his big youth voters right now, considering a great deal of issues, whether it's student death, the Israel-Hamas conflict. Having that access to that younger generation right there on that platform is more important than ever.
What's the game plan for converting TikTok scrolls and double text into actual votes? Is there like a secret sauce, or is this Biden hoping for the best?
I think it's just a shortcut past the media. I mean, it's a chance for him to be his authentic self. If you've ever met him or worked with him, he's hilarious, and he's totally on top of it. He just happens to be older. He also knows, right, and his staff knows, there are older people on TikTok. Some of the most lucrative influencers on TikTok are seniors. So, it's a place for him to cut through. And that's a group that they'll echo what they see. They have a good authenticity sniffer. Great there if they just let him be himself and not do messaging there.
And really importantly, it's a different type of content that you have with a lot of paid media channels. We heard authenticity, genuine self from other folks here. This really is a way to be creative and show a little bit of a softer side than you would normally be able to have in a campaign messaging setting.
It's all about making the connection, right? You have to connect with that voter, even in an emotional way, to really get them to the polls.
So how does he not come up like a dag joke at a rave?
Yes, he has a really good social team, so I think that they're doing fine. I think the issue on social is there's no logic to what catches. right?
Does he have like a cool consultant or something that you know about?
He's hired some smart people, some people out of Wisconsin, Fetterman's people. Like he's hired people that have been there, done that, and who we were, those of us who do politics, were impressed by. Fetterman's team was dope, and he hired them wholesale. What goes on in Wisconsin, where you basically have changed from a Republican-led, basically dictatorship, to democracy winning out due to ground game. Again, TikTok's just part of ground game. The Democrats' strength, ground game, money, right? And the fact that Joe and all the people who are the bench for Democrats, they're just better, right? We're talking about across the board, Democrats are just better. So the more that they're out, the more that they're messaging in a place where it's not filtered, the more they have a chance to get people to vote. And that's what Democrats have to do. They have to get people to vote. And to do that, I have to trust you, and there has to be some inspiration about the stakes, right? So I think he gets to be the bright light there. The Trump is never going to be on there saying anything other than, I hope you all die. So I think that's a thing.
I think Larry brings up a really good point. If you think back of how I'll use the word, Biden's been a little bit snarky and humorous on Twitter versus Trump's Twitter kind of history. I think creatively that's how they lean, and they present very differently. And I think that could be a winning strategy for Biden with, to your point, the brilliant creative minds behind the script.
You are all capital posts.
Good shot. I like that. Anyway.
So with the wildfire spread of misinformation, what is the strategy to douse the flames without getting burned?
I've probably worked on more campaigns, but you fight the fire, right? You have to actually counter. You have to have people who counter with you. You have to.
Do you challenge it straight out on social media? You say this is complete BS. This person's lying. Is that the only way to do it now?
You have
no spin. Just go in there straight. Expose
people that do that. But Biden's about the facts, and he's got to counter with the truth. He's the best first-term president in 60 years. The record says that.
So as Jamie mentioned, TikTok is an ad-free paradise. So how does Biden can't plant the flag without getting booted off the island?
You're looking at misinformation. There are so many different types. You have paid misinformation, you've got conspiracy theories, you've got organic misinformation, and you have really different tactics that you have to use to combat each. At the end of the day, though, a lot of these platforms have an organic misinformation problem. You've got algorithmic manipulation and algorithmic circles that are giving people more of what they are expecting and hoping to hear. And that insular community turns into an echo chamber that's really hard to get out of and even more difficult to cut through. So when you've got folks, on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it these days, and on meta platforms and elsewhere, that are creating these echo chambers that just reinforce deeply misplaced views, it's really hard to get in there.
And is addressing it, does it just amplify it if you address it? I think Gavin's pointing at me saying, yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I want to throw it in a different direction too. Is there any incentivization for any of those social media platforms to actually address disinformation? They claimed to do so back in 2020, but you saw those programs kind of be quietly rolled back.
Well, X has the community notes. Eroded. The community notes are erroneous?
Oh, no, I was just saying a lot of these protections have completely eroded. Whether it's from vaccine misinformation or election information, you see this from YouTube to Twitter to meta platforms. They're pulling back all these protections that were genuinely a good faith effort. But unfortunately, we're getting back to the place where fear mongering ultimately sells impressions because it increases the time on site, and they are weighing those cost benefits.
And Pace, there was something interesting you brought there with community notes. People have started noticing that Elon Musk does seem to have the power to just wave them away on his own account. How soon till he starts doing that on the accounts that he favors as well?
Right. I think he had a community note this past week, and it disappeared, if I remember. I think I have a screenshot somewhere on my phone, though.
Amazing what you can do when you own a platform.
Right.
Yes. Also, it's just important to learn it's important to learn the lessons of Obama and Fetterman. They actually went and fought for the ear, right? So they went and fought. They drastically increase their audio budgets. Just another way to get into people's psyche in a place that was less cluttered by garbage that actually worked for them. Obviously, Obama did preachers as well, but getting people out who can be heard in the clear, whether that's audio or preachers or acolytes, as it were, you have to counter that in another channel, give the brain another chance to hear the truth.
That's a good point. That bring it to another channel means you're no longer facing that clutter. Interesting. Have anyone seen a TikTok post that hit the jackpot in terms of campaign impact? A specific campaign that you want to call out as being great? Yeah, I think that's interesting because I can't think of one either. And I have a TikTok account, and I actually can't think of a specific politician I follow on TikTok that is cool or interesting or provides anything. I think there's one from like 4 years ago. She was a geologist that ran in California, and that's probably the only person I follow that's politically on TikTok. So I think that's actually something interesting to say. Is there a moment when anyone here thought that TikTok might be a golden goose?
I still don't know, especially considering that apparently I read that the youngins are getting their news and using it as a search engine and stuff for that. I think it still could be. It's also early in the season. It's only March. Things could really start heating up over the summer.
Yeah, I think it's a golden goose for people that nobody on this call would see. So, there's a young man in UCLA. He's killing it in Southern California. He's totally for Biden. On top of everything, seems to see everything, post everything. My kids cite him and other people. So, I'm not. It's the key
ambassadors then that you have to have ambassadors that represent that demographic because nobody really wants to see Biden with a backwards baseball cap and skateboard.
I think you have to have things that target trust and that their algorithm carries. I can't explain how the algorithm carries or what it carries, but it seems very clear. My kids are both in college. They can cite very clearly the political stuff that works and what doesn't.
And really is an expanding micro-influencer set of servicers out there that are bringing political messaging to organic TikTok posts. So you can definitely find the messengers for the community.
All right, moving on. One thing that's happening, political groups are scarfing down TV ad space like it's the Last Supper, ballooning prices and leaving crumbs for the rest with a staggering $7 billion on the line. Are we looking at advertising apocalypse or just another day at the auction?
I feel like this happens every cycle, be it the midterms or presidential. And of course, it's going to be amped up this year being a presidential election year. But all the years I sold linear TV, it was always a real concern for the advertisers, for the brands, for the local clients, that political's coming, book your schedules early, if you decide to go dark. But I think this year is going to be no different, though the is upped, is increased.
Price increases, in politics, they always put a premium on everything that you buy. So I think that, it's just part of the expectation. I think from a programmatic standpoint, now is when we need to start thinking more about programmatic guaranteed and how do we try to reserve inventory for like that September, October timeframe when things are going to get eaten up. Large advertisers are going to be spending a ton of money because you're entering holiday season. So I think it's more about trying to just get ahead of it, being a little bit smarter about how we're thinking about spending our money.
I have a question kind of on to advertisers, and how do they feel about the reach with CTV? Do they feel like they can get the same things they could get 4 years ago with linear? Or is it just too fragmented and complicated now?
At DS Political, we've spent so much time working on this in order to string together connected TV sets from all sorts of manufacturers and supply sources. And last cycle, 2022 cycle, was the first time that really, truly at scale, we were able to do household targeted CTV. So much so that it was a full quarter of our business, and this year we're expecting it to be significantly more than that. So, gone are the days where linear TV is the way to reach the largest screen in the house. You see more and more money still being put into it that largely is from an older class of consultants and media buyers, and it's having a smaller and smaller impact because it's being shown just on repeat to the same people. Whereas with proper technology, proper supply path, you're able to go in and really reach the individual voters that you need to win an election. Because at the end of the day, it's maybe what, 8 or 10% of people that are a persuadable voter, maybe less. And so the remainder of it is just waste.
So, and very interesting for you guys in particular, because you don't just have the CTV and TV, you've also got display and other channels, right? So you can actually connect the measurement and you see true frequency and reach, right? That's fascinating. And even are you advanced to the point of like sequential messaging, or is this something that's kind of coming down the line?
No, that absolutely, for our advanced advertisers, sequential messaging, having survey or panel-based reactions, having all sorts of different messaging tracks based on the audience is absolutely part of the game. And really looking at what is the optimal reach and frequency for a target audience. And really, then how do you measure that, not just with, the sort of vanity metrics that you normally would get in a digital campaign, but with true persuasive impact. And, it's tough in politics because your KPI is a secret ballot every other year. It's really hard to measure that. So we spend huge amounts of efforts working on third-party validation, working with, research firms, and actually measuring persuasive impact in an offline world to measure the online or CTV campaigns.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing. I think if we take a look back, 2020 was when CTV was emerging. 22 was when it, really established as part of a winning strategy. The kind of swath of budgets were shifting there. And I think this cycle, it feels a little more noisy. All of the topics are the same. I think now we're getting to the advanced stages of using CTV, one at scale that we hadn't seen before, right? Those kind of television viewing habits have truly shifted. I think CTV is now equivalent to like the way we pick cable channels in the past. We're picking apps on our connected devices. But to Mark's point, I think we are now at the place where we're using advanced measurement techniques to see kind of how are we reaching audiences in addition to broadcasts, right? In addition to linear television buys, but also where do we need to be and what does that frequency, what is that messaging strategy to actually persuade voters? So we're there, right? And now it's the buzz is around how much spend we will pour into these channels, but I think the real story is the advanced use of kind of these technologies and supply paths to really get messages in front of voters.
I think additional color too, just as a backdrop, we say voters are consumers too. Brands have been early adopters of connected TV, and it's taken political a little time to catch up. So now 2024, Jamie, as you said, a very noisy space. I think they're getting on board. The supply is there, the content is there, the performance, and almost look at it like brands look at Black Friday, winning on Black Friday or winning at the box office for entertainments. Well, it's winning on election day for political and utilizing the strengths of CTV and the measurement and the targeting to get you over that line.
Yeah,
so do we know that? Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead. Sorry.
So do the ads justify the means with these inflated ad costs? Or are we just burning money for a bonfire?
I think it's just supply and demand. There's just way more demand, way more money there, and the supply isn't there. And, kind of to my point about just being smarter about media buys, the political market has, to Julie's point, has kind of caught up to, let's call it, private sector or the general market. And, I think the next step is in figuring out, okay, we've supplemented some direct mail and broadcast by layering in CTV. How do we now supplement CTV to reach the voter where else they might be and where else we might be able to get more for our money? And that could be online video, that could be native, that could be display, that could be what have you, and really looking at a full mix programmatically. I think is probably the next step. It may not be this cycle that we really kind of gain that full adoption. But I think it's looking beyond that because there is just overexposure beyond measurement really in CTV. And I think it's then saying, okay, how do we really try to find them in a different place and engage with them?
Anyone have pro tips on how to navigate the ad space Hunger Games?
For politics, yes. It's a 13-week window. Your life is determined in that 13 weeks, and how you navigate the split of spend between raising funds, building your brand and messaging value and inspiring your constituents is difficult. The reason TV is so big is because everybody sees it and it creates fear. The fact that it's the physical face of spend, right? CTV doesn't hit that way. You can't get in a bar and all see the ad that you did a roadblock on all 3 channels. You can't see that in CTV in a bar. So the excitement of that around in multiple bars, I'm sorry, as it were. So the excitement around that's really important. And then realizing that you've got to find a way to be in clear space. And so the best campaigns, as I said, they move into channels where there's less noise. There's too much noise toward the election on big TV. So what are you doing in terms of audio? What are you doing in terms of getting out there in a clear space where the decision can be made? And then lastly, independence is the final fight. And so can you get coverage? Can you get reach and frequency across those people? A lot of times in a way that we dislike. Trump won an election because he suppressed the vote. He used Cambridge audio data to suppress the vote. It was the first time people realized that their data could be used against them. Right? He suppressed the vote in key areas. In the last 3 weeks, the key areas. So you're either trying to get them out or suppress them. That's a battle that's going to be fraught, and it's going to be fought on CTV a lot. So there's good and bad as we go there.
I think you bring up a lot of really interesting points, Larry, just with the phasings of campaigns. But one thing you touched on was sort of that everyone else is doing it, so we got to do it with linear TV. And the fact that there are competitives that show you exactly how much your opponents are putting up, how many points they're buying, really creates this incentive to just double or triple down on that medium where you don't have that in the digital world. So you have this sort of self-selecting encouragement to put more in linear when it might not be the best option.
I think the cost to a certain extent needs to be assumed, beyond the supply and demand, right? In political advertising, we're focused on utilizing data to qualify who we're reaching, right? Anytime you leverage data, there's going to be additional costs on top of whatever the supply costs. So I think, part of the strategy of thinking ahead is who are you partnering with from a data perspective? Who are you partnering with from a supply perspective? Because at the end of the day, the ecosystem really just boils down to data and inventory, whether you're doing political advertising or otherwise. But
it doesn't, and that's part of the problem that we have as digital people, right? Nothing in messaging moves as fast as we could move in targeting. Nothing, right? You haven't met anybody who can do messaging at the speed with which we can target, segment, stop, frequency cap. Nobody can do those things, right? So the winners, the reason Fetterman did better, he just had a team that's what they did. That message is not working. I can see it in my DSP. Stop using that message. Load up 10 of them. Oh, 2 of them are working. Stop the that reality. 99% of campaigns don't understand, and working with all of us, that's at their disposal. And you can't wrap your head. If you've never run a campaign, if I can get rid of TV and never talk about it for 13 weeks, that's fantastic, right? So if I can give through a DSP, OpenX, some private marketplace stuff it's going to go to this audience, and I never have to think about it again, that's fantastic. But we know, as our business is an ABC testing business, if you're good at it, and politics can't get there. Part of their fascination with TikTok is if I can record Biden, I can switch it, and I don't need anybody's help. And so that's an important factor in winning and losing. And politics is about winning and losing. The way you know your stuff worked, you won. The way you know it didn't work, you lost.
Can I ask, is kind of we'll say paid media in the open digital ecosystem, is that kind of seen as a potential experimentation ground for messaging? Because it seems like you could do all of this ABC testing that you're talking about at relatively low expense to see what
only for fundraising in reality. You only use a lot of programmatic for fundraising because the message is the same. Right. But otherwise programmatic is viewed as dangerous by professionals because you don't necessarily have brand control. Right. So it's just a thing.
Well, I'm sorry.
There are places you don't want your ads appearing, and you desperately don't want them appearing there. When they show up, it's a problem that stops your campaign.
But I think
brand safety is something that is sort of table stakes at this point. There are so many solutions to be able to filter out bad impressions that it's something that we really, I feel like don't even talk too much about these days because it's assumed that we're able to handle it. But the really interesting thing, Gavin, on the on the measurement side, there is a huge amount of data that we're able to get with log level access and data clean rooms that we're able to marry up with survey information to see what is actually moving the needle in close to real time and be able to create that feedback loop for our clients on the messaging tracks. We see that, this message is moving more with this type of audience. That's really unbelievably valuable.
Yeah,
And the other, sorry.
To make on Larry's point, when I was engaging in, during the midterms, no agencies wanted to run programmatically for fundraising. They just wanted to focus on Facebook because they found programmatic to actually be less successful. And then on like the clean inventory piece, between Double Verify, IAS, Moat, etc., really ensure you're in a clean, running in clean inventory is like just table stakes. The DSPs have those controls. The SSPs are doing the job. I know at OpenX here, we clean all of our supply. We make sure all of our supply is as clean as possible. You have toggles for MFA. You can look at indirect versus direct. There's a lot of things that can be done now to really kind of control that inventory and still have the scale to reach the audience you want.
I just want to jump in and speak for Julie and myself. So again, I'm a heavy practitioner, former CMO of PubMatic. The reality of the brand safety stuff is it blinds the vast majority of useful minority sites, right? So example, I'll just give one example. If you want to target ebony, well, something that has ebony in it and the name of black females, it won't go through in programmatic. Right, so it just comes up. The only other place, by the way, that those couple of names come together is in sites that I won't mention here because you have a family show and such. But in any event, all I'm saying is brand safety is devastating to reaching minorities, and minorities will win. This is a simple election. It's women, minorities, and youth. If women care, they will decide the election. If women and minorities get together, they will decide. That's not in dispute. So the question is, will they vote? Will they give? Will they care? And for obvious reasons, brand safety gets in the way of targeting, and I can prove it.
So when you were
a million times over.
At PubMatic, Larry, just a question to solve for that. I would assume that you can build domain lists for D&I specific sites in order to get around some of that, if not all of it. I mean, I could understand if you were like fire hosing it, it would get it. But if you created a specific domain, especially based on the supply that's available, domain list and inclusion list that you would want targeted, you could build that and effectively and be able to reach the minority voters and multicultural voters where
ends up being like PMPs, which limit reach a little bit. So I get it. Most of it is a fire hose. You're working with, registered voter data, and then you're kind of doing overlays against areas where for example, one campaign I worked on, it was critical for people to know that the polling place had been moved with less than 24 hours notice. Now, only programmatic could do that. There is no other way to do that. You would get a TV buy, you couldn't get it, right? There was no inventory. But programmatic can do this thing in this DMA, in the household, all those other things. Well, we didn't hit the minorities because there's no time for that. It's an urgent thing, right? So we didn't quite succeed. But programmatic can do that. It's really the only thing that can do that. CTV can do it.
Didn't Jezebel claim that the reason they have financial problems is because of brand safety? Because they were talking about women's health issues and it was being blocked over and over again. I mean, how do you talk about cancer without talking about breast cancer on a woman's site? But then the word breast was blocked.
It's a really crucial issue. And Larry, you bring up really good point on this. It is a difficult thing to solve for, and it's one of the reasons why we've spent the last almost year working on shifting off of a block list to an allow list, and off of block keywords to making sure we're working with trusted pubs. So we are going to be shifting our spend programmatically to an exclusive allow list world. That, again, is a huge undertaking. This is not something that you can just flip on and turn on. But it's something that we've done the research with our supply partners, with our internal teams, and are going to be able to replicate the scale of the open exchange in a cleaner but more equitable environment.
Great. I don't mean to call out program. It's difficult in search as well, and it's difficult in contextual. So it's a problem industry-wide. Mark, I'm aware of what you guys are doing. I applaud that.
Oh man.
Right, so data is the new oil in the political campaign machine, but with everyone drilling, how do you strike gold without causing an environmental disaster? Anyone have a tale where data turned the tide for a campaign, or is it more like finding a needle in a haystack?
Most famous tide turner is still, unfortunately, Trump using Cambridge Analytics to suppress votes in key areas. That is the most famous. The best use of it that I've seen currently is Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. They're kind of state of the art, but the stakes were big there. So I think that matters. And then I just think in terms of data gets the credit in Georgia, but it's just Trump. Trump suppressed his own vote there. And that's why we have two Democratic senators there. God bless. But that wasn't data. The people who consult there will tell you it is. It was just the big guy couldn't shut his mouth.
So go ahead, Mark.
Interesting thing about data and campaigns, for the better part of 4 decades, data has been the foundation of political campaigns, way before it was being used in the digital realm. So whether you've got a campaign that's showing up to your house to knock on your door and have one-to-one conversation, a phone call, direct mail, digital, television, is all driven by the proverbial voter file, which is publicly available data, and it is the foundation for how campaigns ultimately decide who to talk to and how to talk to them. So we get into this quandary where this is how campaigns work, but we have new set of privacy concerns in the digital ecosystem. And so I think one of the really big things is making sure you're able to be as effective as possible with your data, but also respecting people's privacy, respecting opt-outs, respecting legislation, regulation, while still maintaining an effective tech stack. And there are people out there that push the boundaries, go way across the boundaries, which gives a bad name for everyone. But at the end of the day, it's the same data that is allowing someone to show up to your doorstep and have a conversation with.
I think the interesting data that's newish is, data partners who are grouping people based on their perception of specific issues, right? Cannabis inflation, cannabis, so on and so forth, right? And being able to target based on issues that way versus trying to do so utilizing, let's say, keywords or contextual or what have you, or trying to pinpoint specific groups who you are assuming are going to care one way or another. That's been an interesting piece too, because now you have kind of 2 pieces to play the game with. And then I think the other piece that's interesting is starting to look at like correlative audiences, right? So like, if you have a specific group of individuals, what do they look like outside of that? What are their general interests? What are their internet behaviors? And how do you reach them where they are versus in a different way versus utilizing a third-party data partner, for example, on just like kind of their taxonomy for how they're classifying it. So I think there's really can be a 3-pronged approach to leveraging data. Obviously, data is highly necessary, and it'll be interesting in a couple quarters when the cookie deprecates and how all that changes.
Yeah, I think we're in for an interesting year with data as related to elections. There's never a shortage of data, right? As Mark said, we've been using it for decades in political. We've seen so many clients have a severe dependency on the voter file. It's been interesting to watch over the past couple of years how they amend campaign strategy, build deeper sets of tactics, and hopefully diversify that a little bit. But I still think there's a big focus on using the voter file, and it'll be interesting to see come Q3 what Google does, right, with Chrome and how that affects reach of specific campaigns or tactics within digital buys. It's something we're definitely paying attention to and working with clients to test out, as Craig said, additional and differentiated types of tactics that aren't reliant on that kind of cookie-based reach. But it's an interesting year, not about data, that's not new, but how data is deployed and how that will need to change for campaigns.
Yeah, I think the hard part is once you test something, as Larry put it, we have such a small window where everything is basically wrong. By the time you know what worked and what didn't, it's basically over. And then you've got to wait a couple of years or more before you can deploy tactics, and everything's changed since then. So it's really like, how do you innovate at the forefront, determine impact, and then just continue to innovate along, I think are key focuses.
I think too, I was just going to add, I think too, hearing from clients that yes, they use the voter file data, but when you get down to that crunch time leading up to the general election, the gloves sometimes come off and they remove the voter file data and to make sure they're not leaving any valuable, persuadable voters on the table. I've heard that as well.
Yeah, I mean,
Mark,
I was
Mark,
just
you
going
going
to
to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, with cookie deprecation, the good news is there are a lot of replacement identifiers out there. It is a patchwork. It's not easy to work with. It takes a huge amount of time, effort, and money to plumb them all together. But we're seeing really excellent scale when we're able to piece together all of these different identifiers and still be able to have that one-to-one addressability. So I'm not seeing that we're going to have a cliff, that go off a cliff when the cookie deprecates. We've been thinking about this for really 5 years at this point. But it really also, as a practitioner who sells media tied to data, sort of like literally all we do, it's important to make sure that we're not over-targeting as well. And that's something that really happened back in 2020, where with Hillary v. Trump, Hillary was talking to a very small section of the electorate for a lot of the time and not expanding out beyond that sort of core supporter base, where Trump was going out there and through merch sales, going and finding all sorts of new people that had been previously disenfranchised and pulling them into the mix. And so by over-targeting, we have the option to cut out people that ultimately could be a supporter. So you really have to strike that balance of how do you go broad, bring more people into your tent, but make sure you're also not being wasteful at the same time.
Is there a risk in drowning the data while missing the message? How do you keep your campaign from becoming a soulless data zombie?
We've heard this a few times already. The messaging is more important than the data. It is more important than the technology. It's more important than anything that anyone on this call is doing here. We say this constantly to our clients. We can bring the best data, tech, inventory to the table. We're going to get you 30% of the way there. You got to get the rest of the way there yourself. You can learn from our data. You can learn from the insights that we can provide to you. You can react to it. But ultimately, it's getting the right message to the right people.
Can I flip that to the other side, though? With what I do is a lot about brand safety, but for publishers and supply side people. And before, like the end of last year, I'm talking to people about, what are you excited about? Are you excited about political advertising? They're like, yeah, I like the revenue, but I'm really scared about what's going to come in the pipes. What kind of messaging? What kind of weird stuff? So, a lot of publications are really, really apprehensive when it comes to what that messaging would be. I mean, what really struck me there. Sorry about.
Do you need to get out? Is your building on fire?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Right when I try to give my big point, of course.
That's the power of Mark Zuckerberg.
New York City. I miss New York. This reminds me of New York. That is when I was working on 22nd and Broadway. Every single time I'd have a call, I swear there'd be the truck coming by.
I hope you guys feel like you're in New York right now.
I feel like I never left.
But I mean, there's a lot of and it's the same deal with the misinformation. They don't want to be, the publishers don't want to be a part of it. The ad tech don't want to be a part of it either. So I'm just saying there's a lot of anxiety there, and there are more brands to protect than just say the campaigns themselves.
I don't know, Gavin. I feel like I feel like publishers and smaller local publishers are more crunched now ever than revenue, are excited about the potential of a political windfall. I think they just need the ability to control trust who they're offering supply to, right? Going through trusted supply paths, but also being able to control the ability to block anything that they're not comfortable with. But I think the large swaths of political spend aren't coming from campaigns or creatives that are going to make the normal kind of news consumer skittish. I think the excitement over the potential spend and revenue outweighs some of that risk.
Yeah, Danielle, that was a good setup for me. Yes, I appreciate it.
Unintentional.
You're welcome. That one. For OpenX going into this cycle and this year specifically, publishers obviously are the core of our business. So we took on two specific initiatives for exactly this purpose. One was surveying all of them to understand their interest in whether or not they'd be open to accepting political and to what degree, because obviously it depends on how you define the political and so on and so forth. And as part of that, we also built a creative review tool for the publisher. So certain ones, part launch, were like, we're okay. certain ones are like, we're okay if you guys want to approve it, and certain ones want to see it. So they're able to, for the ones who are a little bit more concerned, have a tool that comes up, so as creative becomes available with an immediacy, can go ahead and approve or reject based on the messaging that's in that, in order to kind of help protect them and allow them to maximize on the revenue potential.
That's great stuff. The Media Trust does something very similar for publishers. We take it another step farther, and we have user-reported ads where users themselves can say, like, hey, I don't like this. And it's really up to then the publisher themselves be like, ooh, no, let's not show that one ever again. I think, Jamie, you're absolutely right. It's about control over the type of content that's coming in. But you don't want that to spoil the golden goose of this revenue opportunity.
I think so too. And I think on the DSP side, we have human review of all political ads before they set live. And we do that mostly to protect our relationships with supply side. We don't want to send, inappropriate content your way and have the inventory blocked. So I think there's also a focus and an interest on the buy side to be able to make sure we're all comfortable with what's kind of moving through the pipeline.
Totally. And every DSP should be doing the exact same thing.
And we have the same levers in place, reviewing the content, the ads before they go live as well. Very important.
Wait, the future political ads is... Go ahead, Mark. Sorry, before we go.
I was just going to say, the creative approval is also a huge hang-up for a lot of spend, because a lot of the money that's coming through programmatic pipes, they're looking to spend this yesterday. And so that's why...
Waiting a week isn't possible.
Yeah, so that manual intervention oftentimes, causes a hang-up for where we can actually put our money. And, we've spent the last 13 years cultivating relationships to make sure that when folks see something coming through a DS political pipe, they know that it's already going to be reviewed. They don't have to go through that extra manual step and create, more time delay, and ultimately, hopefully, increase yield for the publishers too.
So the future political ads is clear as mud. With technology evolving at breakneck speed, are we looking at a revolution or another round of buzzword bingo? Anyone?
There's 50 states and many locals, and so there'll be innovation, and it'll pop up, and we'll each see it as it occurs. What we hope will be different about this campaign cycle, given the incredible amount of money that happens, there's a tendency over the final 13 weeks to kind of hone in on doing less and pouring more money into that, whereas winners actually find open spaces. And so can people actually determine to use news? And Jamie will be an early indicator of that. It's great actually for campaigns, but nobody believes it. So can that be a thing? And can we use digital out of home? Can we be better at using the power of the pipes to diversify our message, meet more people on their journey in life, so that when they have us top of mind when they go into the polls?
I don't think 2024 looks anything like 2022, and I think 2026 is going to be completely different in terms of the technology, the measurement capabilities, and the channels. I mean, just bringing up digital out of home. Imagine how much more programmatic digital out of home is going to be available in it's going to be a completely different landscape.
Or think that we're not talking about advertising in the metaverse this year.
Yeah, I'm curious. Is anybody seeing campaigns in VR or AR? Are we preparing for a Matrix moment, or is this just an expensive party trick?
I think AR, I'm very glad you brought that up, because, goodness knows what we're going to look like with not even Apple Vision Pro adoption. There's competitors by TCL and other ones. I tried out at CES. There's a lot of different technologies out there. Honestly, I don't think we've even scratched the surface with consumer advertising, let alone political.
Yeah, well, I see something like, imagine you have your AR glasses on, you're going by the White House. You could change the color of the White House to fit a campaign, or, have a celebration poster on it. I mean, anything like that would be great for branding and the message. AI and political ads, are we crafting messages, or are we just going to end up writing our own concession speeches?
I really feel like we're taking the first step. Creative briefs. They're producing 50 different briefs, taking the top 5 from those, and then having a human go in and really turn those into something that's a real actionable product. So it's a great process improver, speed improvement, creative assistant. We're not to the point where it is optimizing every media campaign and creating new content on the fly. Who knows what it's going to look like in the future? But right now, it's a great tool for many people.
I think too, though, with creative, it's a tool, but you can't lose that human touch. And in my experience in talking with agencies, you still need to have the pulse on that and make sure you're not missing the mark. You want to be aligned with that potential voter out there and make sure that you're not sabotaging the campaign as well. I think it's still very new.
I think it's new, but I think we're a step away and not too far from rapidly being able to scale personalization in messaging from AI. I think that's the next place where we will see the influence at scale. Will it be this cycle? I don't know, because I don't know how you connect the audience with the messaging and the piece with the automation of AI. But I think that's the next piece of this. Will it be 2026 when that happens? Probably before that, right? But that's kind of what I'm looking ahead to, kind of wondering how that will all work itself out.
Well, we do get the Virginia governor's race in 2025 to experiment with new technologies. As
we'll work on that.
Child of Virginia, I always remember it's the next year. But the other thing, I think we should all...
You'll see it in this format.
Oh, totally. I think the other thing we should look at is what's going on in retail media and commerce media. Already they are using AI to show products on different backgrounds to different audiences. That's a fascinating space for development, political, from the experience they have. I know companies like Triple Lift and Undertone are doing fascinating things there. It's something to watch.
So what's the one thing that crossed your mind recently about the 2024 campaign that you never admit in polite company?
I mean, I only hang out in impolite company, so I struggle a bit there. That stumped me pretty good. I don't know.
I know.
I think it's funny that we still think polling is a thing, but other than that, I don't.
Yeah, with all this data, why are we polling people? We first of all, anyone in this panel knows if you ask people a question, it changes the answer. First of all, I think everybody knows that. So if you're going to ask people their opinion, they're going to give you an opinion, not necessarily who they're going to vote for. I don't know if it's the observer effect or it's the polling effect. And we have all the data. Why are we doing polling still?
There's just an assumption mix match with who's going to show up to vote. We saw that in 2020. We see that repeatedly where, it's very difficult to make predictions on what that ultimate electorate is going to look like.
Is there any data on who says they're going to vote for someone versus if they actually show up?
You have had a lot of really interesting studies around that with Donald Trump specifically, where people were honestly embarrassed to tell a live pollster that they were going to vote for Donald Trump. And then you saw online polls or anonymous ways of having that interaction skew much more towards the actual results of the election. And so, yeah, you do have that sort of observer or pollster bias there where you're shaping the outcome based on not only just the fact that it's being asked, but the methodology in which it's being asked.
I'm also curious as to, oftentimes in politics, folks who have done certain things, we'll say polling as one example of this. We've done polling. The pollsters worked with a consultant who's worked with a campaign for decades. They're still in the business. It's still the business of politics. We're doing it. We're funneling money through our friends and partners we have for decades. When does this generation move on? And when, to your point, Larry, the irrelevancy of polling, on site, I think some of it is also just the way things have been done in politics tend to stick, right? And how will that change over the next couple of cycles?
So connected TV is turning the political ad game into the Wild West with gold mines and land mines side by side. As the dust settles, are we looking at a new frontier or just another shootout at the OK Corral?
I think you're able to reach the largest, most influential screen in the house with an accuracy that you've never been able to do before.
I think, too, we haven't really touched a ton on creative. The ubiquitous QR code is everywhere. It made its comeback in the pandemic. And then you have interactive ad units. I think the creative can be a game changer, too. And what it brings to the table and who's going to be, brands have been on board, but we've seen some political ads that are now using the QR codes. Why wouldn't you engage that consumer at that next level with the mobile device? And then to mention, our screens are much larger. You have much more real estate to be adding images and overlays and galleries and whatnot. So I think there's a huge amount of opportunity. I think we're going to see more of that to come in the future.
surprised we're not talking about ACR data as much as well, because there's so much technology in TVs now, and the fact that we can retarget off of ad exposure or get information about television viewing habits of a specific audience that you have. There's just so much that can be done, not just with the fact that it is a connected television, but it's a connected television that's sending data back to advertisers.
Yeah, and I think,
can we really do precision sharpshooting, or is it like spraying and praying?
No,
it's precise.
Oh, go ahead, Larry.
No,
I don't know. I thought Gavin was stuck for a second.
No, CTV is precise, and the data you get back is phenomenal. Like, I don't.
And I think there's no turning back to the fact that political buyers, political campaigns need speed and agility and the ability to buy CTV quickly with intelligence and kind of optimize the way you need to versus traditional linear options. I think there's definitely no going back there. And it'll be interesting to see kind of how the next couple of years evolve from there.
Does it really enhance the message, or does it interrupt people's favorite show?
Yeah. And the data shows, right? Folks don't hesitate from, paying, lower subscription fees to be able to see ads, for their Hulu subscriptions or what may be it. They don't seem to mind the ads.
But will political ads change that? Will people be tired of seeing Donald Trump on their screen?
I think so.
They will be. They'll be tired of seeing everyone. You got to remember, there's 4 tiers of political money. It's going to be exhausting. It's going to be final 13 weeks will be a thing, and all of us will be hearing from brands that are like, but I need to be on air. It's like, no. So
I can guarantee that it will be exhausting and people will be turned off. That's the way it works. And unfortunately, that's almost the way it has to work to cut through the noise to the persuadable voter. If you're talking to your supporters, reminding them to turn out to vote, or you're making appeal, it's easier to cut through. But when you're trying to reach maybe a non-receptive consumer or a voter, someone that doesn't know they need to be persuaded, it's really hard to get through, which is why we use, ultimately a blunt instrument.
And then there's a finite end, right? Then election day comes, it all goes away, and everyone forgets how annoying those political ads were, and unless you live in Virginia, and they come back the next year. But that's the beauty of the cycle, right?
So as the CTV courts, the young and the tech savvy, what's the trick not to just catching their eye, but holding their gaze? I think Dark Brandon did really well. I see it still constantly on X. Is that just the key? Memes? Do we just have to be meme lords?
Well, why don't we put it instead of memes? Why don't we say clever content and engaging content? And let's stop talking about messaging. It's actually content itself. And that's what the TikTok opportunity is. Clever ways to reach out and engage users that goes beyond just Dark Brandon, it keeps alive because people put him into memes and they animate him and you see the red eyes come out of photos. It's fun. Politics can occasionally be fun.
But still, how do we speak their language?
It's a TV show. What Trump brought to it was he's a TV star, ran a TV star campaign with some data attached to it. Everything he did was content. When you look on the news, Trump does something stupid. He's on the news. He is the classic example of the cream and the scum rise, right? So if he does something scummy, it's news. If he does something good, which is rare, it's news too. If Biden does something good, it's not the biggest news, right? But if he's in trouble or he appears old, it's big news, right? So the ability, again, one of the things when, you guys all make the great point that it's content is content happens at speed, right? Ads do not. So, it's all the stuff we're all older here. So we know the value of integration. Politics is integration, right? It's an integrated campaign. And the difference is when something shocking happens, you have to be clear about how you take advantage of it, whether that was good or bad, because something bad will happen.
How will emerging tech shape the CTV landscape? Are we setting sail for uncharted waters or circling back to familiar shores? Personally, I think it's just linear TV all over again. I think we're going to be talking about shows.
I think
eventually it's going to be all about shows, not networks. People are going to target shows. And I think that's going to be very important for the political landscape.
The general market's already doing that, utilizing, content targeting, and so on and so forth. So, like political, going to follow suit. Julie's point earlier, you get into September, October, and then probably aren't going to care quite as much. But looking at those key indicators that we're getting in order to be able to really hone in, and you don't have to target by publisher or app, and you can target based on show.
Also, Craig's great point before. Craig, you were spot on. There's a lot more correlation going on than we generally talk about in public with CTV. So Mark can probably speak to that as well. I sit in Amazon, so I'm not allowed to do political advertising on our platform, but the correlations drive a great deal of our results. Unlike other people, I do sit on a store, so I actually know it works. I don't have it's not a mystery to me or why Amazon has Amazon Prime and Amazon advertising. It's 15 touches on their store, they get a sale.
I think the biggest difference, right, is you have fireplace apps and things like that ads are going to show up on. And, going back to my earlier comments about just controlling quality and controlling the inventory and kind of where you're showing up, it can be a good supplement for broadcast as long as you're thinking about it in the right context and make sure that you're controlling, where you are, right? Are you actually glass on wall and are you part of a fireplace app? Are you finding yourself in an area where you're not going to get the engagement? Yeah, I think we can all agree that messaging or content is the key, but you still need to, that whoever said it, I think it was either Larry or Mark, being the 30 or 40% of the way there, leading the horse to water kind of thing. That's where, the inventory and the data come in. And inventory in this case is like, where are you actually showing up from a CTV perspective, regardless of whether it be the data targeting or the different levers we can pull from a CTV.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We talked so much about CTV, but we didn't talk. I'm so glad you mentioned the Fireplace app. I was just chatting with that about somebody else. We haven't chatted at all about IVT. Are there IVT concerns? Oh yeah, I just saw all the heads nod. It was like, ugh. So because I feel like I think brands are still very hesitant about the space because of that. I'm wondering if the same exists with political.
Right person that you're serving that to in a brand safe, high quality environment, we want the impression, right? We want to be able to find new ways to cut through the noise. And so a lot of that is looking at in new frontiers.
You get a shocking amount of questions about FAST. So
before we go, I'd like to ask everybody, if you could send yourself a time traveling text message to yourself when you start in industry, what would you tell yourself? And most importantly, would you listen to yourself? Julie, you want to go first?
I think at the onset of my career, I was an advertising major and I wanted to be a copywriter and I didn't get a portfolio together and I ended up going down the media path. And I think back in the day, it was like, don't be afraid of the numbers. That was kind of the thing that I told myself, and ended up worked at a small ad agency and then went over to media sales. And I think at the end of the day, I think it's just go with your gut. And my gut led me to where I am today. And I've taken a lot of different risks and I've done digital out of home and .2, and I'm loving where I am now. So go with your gut. Your gut usually doesn't lead you astray.
Mark, what would you tell yourself?
It would be very similar to that, honestly. It's take risks with conviction. Be willing to put yourself out there and make it happen.
The person I called Amy for 2 weeks.
Thank you. I would tell myself.
I could just call you Jaime. How about that, Jaime?
Whatever you want. It's fine.
Jamie, sorry.
It's all right. I would tell myself you'll likely end up in a place in a category that you haven't even considered at this point. My first job was buying television for Procter & Gamble at Starcom. Wasn't even into politics, so I would tell myself, be open to any opportunities, even if it's something you're not at the moment passionate about, because the interest can evolve over time.
Craig?
Yeah, I agree with you said something important. I'm sure I agree with Gavin with what they say. But to add, it's kind of to dabble and absorb. So just like dabble in as much as you can and absorb as much as possible to kind of just learn everything, as much about everything that you can, to kind of find where your path is going to take you, to figure out like, what do you like best? Where do you feel like you can provide the most value?
Larry?
Probably, I would be quicker to realize that you're always going to be learning. And to be a great learner, you're always going to be teaching.
This may be the first panel someone didn't say buy Apple stock. I think everyone says, someone always says that. They're going to say buy stock. And last but not least, Gavin Dunaway.
Well, I get to kind of bring it back home to you because I started in this industry when I was in 2009 as the editor for Dodos. And if I was to go back then, I would tell myself, first off, programmatic direct is going to be a thing later than you realized, and it's going to be called programmatic guaranteed. Second thing would be Google is definitely going to eat most of programmatic display. Don't doubt yourself on that. And the third thing would be last a lot longer than you think it is.
And that's a wrap on today's digital deep dive into the pixelated heart of political campaigning. Whether you're here for the memes, the strategies, or just to keep tabs on how the internet continues to redefine democracy, we've unpacked it all. From TikTok tactics to the battleground of connected TV, the only certainty in political advertising is change. Thank you to Troutman Amen for powering this podcast. Stay curious, stay bold, and know more than you did yesterday.